Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Today we are joined by Lisa Ribacoff, a nationally recognized polygraph examiner, investigator, educator, and host of Liars and Lovers podcast. For decades, polygraphs have played a role in some of the most well-known criminal investigations in the world. They've been used to help investigators develop investigative leads, evaluate statements, and assist investigations in their search for the truth. At the same time, they've also been the subject of controversy, skepticism, and countless myths. So, what can a polygraph actually tell investigators? What are its limitations? Why do law enforcement agencies continue to use them even though the results generally aren't admissible in court? And can someone really beat a polygraph? Today, Lisa is going to take us behind the scenes of the polygraph process. We'll discuss how examinations are conducted and what the instrument is actually measuring, common misconceptions about lie detector tests, the psychology behind deception, and how experienced examiners use polygraphs as just one piece of a much larger investigation. Whether you're a true crime fan, a law enforcement professional, or simply curious about the science behind credibility and deception, I think you're going to enjoy a lot of the show. Lisa, welcome to the show, and congratulations on your show, Liars and Lovers. That is available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, anywhere where you can get a podcast. You've already got your merch line out available as well. It looks great. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. How are you?
All right. So sorry for butchering that intro, but other than that, how have you been?
I'm keeping my head afloat, and hopefully I'm keeping it attached to the rest of my body. It's been a little crazy because this new passion project of mine that I decided to randomly launch on last Saturday is kind of just taken off with, it's like chasing a toddler. That's like you need to change the diaper, and they're just running around with almost like the Winnie the Pooh look where there's no pants. It's just like a diaper and a shirt. You're trying to it's like the greased up deaf guy from Family Guy. And you're just trying to get a hold of it, but it just won't go anywhere. So otherwise it's good, but just also gives me an opportunity to stay in the air conditioning because it's been averaging 115 degrees for the past week every day in Vegas. So I think it's a
Yeah,
good
I,
run.
I think Vegas is a little bit warm this time of year, I hear.
It's usually warm, but it's not this warm. So I'm very appreciative of my air conditioning.
Well, let's talk about what you've been doing before this. So,
Yeah.
how did you get into polygraph examinations to begin with?
So I actually started off as a private investigator. I was raised in the family business. I started, I guess, working as Harriet Spy when I was probably around 7 or 8 years old with my dad, where he owned and operated his own private investigation firm. Surveillances would go on where we would have agents staged outside an individual's residence or their work, and we never knew if someone was actually in the house or at the job where they were supposed to be at the given time. So what he would have me do is he would actually call the person's house and or their home, and this is obviously before cell phones were around, and he would have me make prank phone calls just to see if I can get the person on the phone. And I remember
Oh,
being a kid
wow.
and being like my parents are telling me to make a prank phone call. I'm like, absolutely, I'm in, no problem. So I trying to sell Girl Scout cookies over the phone, or I would say I was calling from the Red Heart, American Red Cross, that we needed, like there was a blood drive. Do you want to sign up for it? Just to get the person on the phone. And I remember always that giddy feeling of hanging up and be like, this is so cool. I just made a prank phone call, and my parents know about it. And then as I got older, I kind of got to learn more and more about what the industry was like. And I had my dad in the image of like, this is James Bond. He's got some cool stuff going on. And then I started working for him when I was in high school, when I was in undergrad for college. I went and got my own private investigator's license in New York. And then we realized at one point that I needed to close my cases because I was overseeing all of the investigations as a supervisor. And the weird thing is that when I went to polygraph school, that's when the members of the Catholic Church were being accused of misconduct involving minors.
Oh,
And
wow.
I had a lot of insurance cases coming in because the victim would go ahead and report it, and then a lawsuit would take place. So the insurance policy would then kick in. Um, I had so many cases sitting on my desk, and I said there has to be some way or some investigative tool that I can utilize to go ahead and help me ascertain information on whether or not did the actual event and the allegation take place, and B, how can I close my cases quicker. Ultimately, at that time, my father was also a polygraph examiner. So he's like, you know what? Let's send you to polygraph school for the 10 weeks. You can go play Madeline and like live in the hotel in, in Philadelphia. And that's ultimately what I did. And that was almost 16 years ago. And I've hit the ground running. Most people think like, oh, you do 20 years of a career and you can retire. But I just 39 last month. So even if I were to go work for another 4 years, I can't retire at 42. I'd be bored out of my mind. So
Right.
I'm just still going as long as I can. Now it's just become my new normal day to day of turning the polygraph almost like into a therapeutic process because people are coming to me with their situation of why they need to actually take the exam. There's usually a therapy component to it because they have to explain to me why they're there and what the situation is. So they're getting an individual to hear their side of the story, which is completely unbiased because I've never met anyone else in the situation and I've never spoken to anyone else.
So, can we kind of go through this process of what's supposed to occur with the polygraph? Because my understanding is it's not just the polygraph examination. You do an interview beforehand, and then is there one after as well? Can you kind of work us through that?
Oh, yeah, of course. So what happens is that the individual will arrive to my office, or maybe I'll go to an attorney's office and do it. And sometimes I'll even go into prisons and jails and I'll test inmates that are sitting there shackled up. I've been to maximum state facilities in Connecticut when I was living there. I've gone to Rikers Island. So going into prison systems and even the federal prison system with the BOP in Brooklyn, um, I get excited. Like I'm one of those people that will get to the facility early, find like the welcome to the prison sign outside the gates and take a selfie underneath and then check in on Facebook and be like, look where I am tonight. I don't know if it's the excitement of knowing the fact that I don't have to eat the bologna sandwich or whatever's being served for lunch, or
Right.
that I'm there and I'm actually leaving at the end of the day. But the polygraph itself, the overall from start to finish takes anywhere from a minimum of 90 minutes and sometimes up to maybe 3-4 hours. It also depends upon the issue that's being tested and also whether or not the individual passes or fails. So if an individual obviously is going to be passing an exam, which I don't know the results until the test is done. So there's a common theme of, well, you're looking at the charts and you're scoring along the way. I'm not doing that because I want to make sure that I'm physically present for the actual chart collection and I see what's going on. Because my head is down and I'm sitting here doing math, I'm not paying attention to A, the chart in front of me, and B, the individual sitting next to me. So I have to be fully cognitively aware of what's going on. But the steps are ultimately them coming in, signing a consent and authorization form, because I need their written consent that they're taking the test. Them physically being there is just not enough for me. Then I'll go ahead and do what I like to refer to as the pre-test interview, where I get their socioeconomic and background information, their age, where they're currently living, what are they doing for work, are they on medications, do they have any medical conditions. I discuss drugs and alcohol with them to make sure that there's nothing chemically in their system at that time to supersede the possibility of them not being able to take the test or any physiological tracing that I acquire from them, from their body's reactions to the questions occurring on the chart. And then I go into just the criminal history, make sure that they don't have anything going on in their past which would hinder them from taking the exam. I also ask them, have they taken an exam before? But my favorite question of the pretest is, what do you know about the polygraph? Because it also gives me an opportunity where if they start throwing out what I like to refer as like hot words, like countermeasures, or they give me certain I can't speak, I'm sorry. They give me certain terminology that for me, in my head, it's an indicator that goes, okay, they've done research. Because going into a polygraph exam, you can do research, that's fine. But there's difference of wanting to learn about the polygraph versus I want to learn how to beat the test.
So,
So I
and
can
that
different.
just goes, sorry to interrupt you, but I've
No,
just got to ask this. Do,
yeah.
when you're sitting down with someone, are you evaluating whether you think the person is going to lie to you or not? Like, is that part of the process? And then the follow-up to that would be, is have you caught people just obviously doing things to try to deceive the test? And can you give us some examples of that's happened?
Yeah, of course. So to answer your first question, am I going ahead and evaluating them? So during the interview test, I don't do it in relationship testing. I'll do it more in a case involving maybe a theft or a criminal act of some degree, where I'll give them a scripted interview and the answers are then gone ahead and receiving a numerical value. It's just a forensic interview. And at that point, after the forensic interview, I will go and add up the scores for each certain question. Like a question on the forensic interview is, let's say there's a theft involved. I'm going to go ahead and ask, who can you vouch for? Well, an innocent person that has nothing to do with the crime, the answer should be myself. I can vouch for myself because I know for a fact that I have nothing to do with this at all. But if they're not going to put themselves into the equation, like a guilty person, they may go ahead and give someone else's name. They're not going to go ahead and vouch for themselves. So right there, I have a negative response because they're not vouching for themselves. Another question that I like on there is, listen, if you didn't have anything to do with this, you didn't plan it, you're not working with anyone, you don't know where missing items are, who can you vouch for? And that also allows me to expand my suspect pool of individuals that maybe I should be speaking with. So again, everything is a scripted interview. That's the only time prior to actually administering the exam that I have an opportunity to formulate my own opinion, because I actually have the data from their reaction, from their responses, that I can go ahead and score. Going into what you had mentioned before pertaining to have people done things, and what have I seen pertaining to different countermeasures or what people are trying to do to change their body's physiological reactions. A big misconception, and I think it's because of the media and things that are shown in TV and movies, people have tried putting a tack on their shoe on the bottom of their shoe and they push down on it,
I was going to
which
ask
is,
you about that because I've seen that
yeah.
in like several movies where they do that, and I didn't know if that was legit.
So what happens is that what I'm trying to, I have it in the closet. I was going to show you what the actual the setup is, but the individual during the exam has two tubes wrapped around their chest, one on the top and then one on their stomach. They're wearing a blood pressure cuff, and then they have two sticky pads which monitor sweat gland reaction. And they also have pulsometer on their fingers. Like during COVID, when we were all checking our oxygen levels, that's what they're wearing during the test also. So I can look for the call for oxygen in someone's blood when they respond. So what happens is that the individual will put a tag in their shoe and they'll try pushing down on it during the actual test. But what they don't realize also is that they are sitting on an activity pad, which I know if there's movement, I have to be aware of it because they're trying to change the physiological tracings of their body. And I'm measuring the autonomic nervous system. The keyword is automatic. I'm going to look at something that you cannot control. So if I have an individual sitting there with their breathing components on and they hold their breath, I'm going to see that. And that's not normal to sit there and try and hold your breath for 30 seconds, especially when you look like you start turning blue. The same thing with taking a deep breath. you can take a deep breath, but not when you're going ahead and you're inhaling so much that creates distortion on the chart. And those are things that I'm trained to look for on the exam. There's also the misconception if you like someone squeezes their butt cheeks, I see it because it's showing up on the activity pad, which is connected to my computer. And there's a couple of other ones, but those are the most common ones. I know that sometimes in movies they talk about putting a penny in the mouth. That's also come. I'll also see that. So even though it's been sitting in your mouth the whole time, which is kind of disgusting, I doubt it's sanitized beforehand. I'll be able to see the person moving their tongue within their mouth or some biting on the inside of it. So after 17 years, it's a constant evolution of what people try and do to beat the test. But I tell everyone at the beginning of the test, I said, listen, you wouldn't try and beat the test if you knew you were going to pass.
So that brings me to another question is, I mean, I would be nervous personally if you strap me down for a polygraph exam. Is that
Yeah.
normal to be nervous? And is that kind of part of what you're gauging in there? Or how do you take that into effect? Because you just described having two straps put around your chest and, a bunch of other devices connected to you. That seems like that could build up people's anxiety or nerves.
Oh, no, of course. It's one of the most common questions I'll get when someone wants to book an exam. They're like, I'm anxious, I'm nervous. Like, how does it affect the test? And the straight outright answer I tell everyone is that I say, listen, everyone that walks in here is nervous. I still have to take a polygraph test sometimes because I need to maintain clearances or licenses and things like that. And I still freak out because it's a normal reaction. I'm freaking out because I'm innocent and A, don't want to take this test, but
Right.
B, I feel some type of way because I need to have the trust and faith in the examiner that's sitting across the table from me that they're competent and they can actually rule decision and create a finding that I was not being deceptive. So when you have an innocent person, that's usually what they're going ahead and having their concerns pertaining to anxiety and nerves. When you're dealing with a guilty person, that's the totally opposite reaction of what they're feeling. They're having the reaction of, holy crap, I'm going to get caught. Holy crap, am I going to end up, like, am I going to go home after this? Or she or someone else going to call the cops and I'm left my house this morning, but I'm not going home, I'm going to jail directly. So because of the situation and the testable issue and the individual itself, that will go ahead and determine their level of anxiety and nervousness. But it has no bearing because if nerves affected the test, I'd be unemployed because then no one would be able to take an exam.
Is there a way to beat the test?
Yes, and I can't go into it.
Is that something that I guess and I don't expect you to give us
No.
details on how to beat a polygraph unless you want
So
this to go viral, but
yeah,
I would
no,
feel
I
bad
can't.
about that. So,
No. Yeah,
is there, go ahead.
so ultimately you cannot, and I like to call it beat the box because realistically, you know what, let me get my hand dandy notebook over here. I want to actually show you what it looks like because that way everyone has an idea. Like Dora the Explorer because I actually walk around. It's mobile. It's not like this big contraption. It just it's in a bag. And okay, here we go. So this ultimately is the actual polygraph itself.
Okay.
And then
So for
here
those who are
are,
listening, it's a small device about what, like 7 inches maybe?
yeah, it's really not that big.
It's like a
Let
small
me,
hard drive, like an
yeah,
external hard drive.
exactly. It's an extra hard drive. And then here are all the different things that we can measure on the actual test. So I have two for breathing, top and bottom, blood pressure, that seat sensor I was talking about. Um, I also have that oxygen, the sweat gland. So each one has a different channel. So they're all different things I'm measuring. You can beat an examiner, but you can't beat this because you would have to control your body's physiological reactions and you cannot control your autonomic nervous system. So therefore, what you're doing physically to try and change your reactions, I'm seeing. If the examiner is not trained on what you are doing, that is how you're going to beat the test. You can't beat the box per se, but you can beat the examiner. And that's how individuals make it through the polygraph test that are guilty, because the examiner is not sufficiently trained to get the information.
So if someone was skilled or experienced like yourself, the odds would
Mhm.
be extremely minimal.
Yeah, if the examiner is attending their continuing education seminars and receiving the additional training that is ongoing, because what countermeasures and look like, uh, even 15 years ago, things that were done then are either not being done now or vice versa. Because if someone tried something 15 years ago and now it's become the trend and examiners are trained on that, then obviously it becomes more of a less likely used thing because the examiners are at least aware of what you're doing. Um, it's again, it just makes sure that the examiner is trained and up to date. And I'll tell everybody this: you do have to take an exam for some reason. Please check the credentials of your examiner. Make sure they actually did go to school where they did, and ask them, like, when was the last time you had training? Because there are some examiners that went to polygraph school in like 1985, 86, 87. They're still practicing now, but they have never stepped foot into a classroom since. And we know there's always technological advances. We know that things change over the course of time and it's a skill set, but just because you have a skill doesn't mean you can't learn more.
Right. And I think what you said was key is, I mean, people have, I'm sure, are always trying to find ways to beat the system. And
Mhm.
if you're not going to continue an education, you're not going to learn those loopholes, right?
Yeah, and then people just fall through the cracks. And then you have guilty people that have committed a crime being released to the free world. I mean, imagine, because we do something, it's used in sex offender monitoring. So imagine a bunch of sex offenders going to an individual that's not up with their continuing education and they're doing countermeasures to try and beat the test because they've been acting out and violating the terms of their probation or parole, and they get an examiner that has no clue what's going on. Those sex offenders are going to be released into the wild per se, and if they've already violated the terms of their probation and parole, there's a good chance that they could be violating against an individual that we have no knowledge of, and that's the scary part.
Right. No, that is. When you do find someone that you clearly know has failed the test, they're lying to you,
Mhm.
do you call them out after that process is over and have them redo it, or how do you verify that?
So the software has algorithms built into it. And so what I have the opportunity to do is I have the opportunity to remove any possible bias I could have regarding the individual in the test. So let's say you came in, you're wearing a blue shirt, and I go, crap, I like that color blue. I prefer turquoise. I'm going to fail him because he's wearing a blue shirt. Nothing to do with the results. I just don't like that color. I'm coming in with a bias already pertaining to what your results are going to be. However, if I use the algorithm that's built into the software, it completely removes my bias. And it's because it's automatically done. It's already set with the values of what has to be done and the scoring also. But at the same time, I've gone ahead and I've run a test, and I can render an opinion, meaning I can determine pass failure in the middle of the inconclusive, but I just want a second opinion. All I have to do is go into the software, save everything as a PDF, and I can email them to a colleague of mine and say, listen, do me a favor. I need you to do a quality control, meaning I'm not telling you the questions, you're flying blind. I just need you to score these charts because charts are charts. It does not matter what the topic is. I just need to know what value are you going to give the results. So there are opportunities to go ahead and have a second opinion, whether it's, I guess, computer versus human, if I think that's the best comparison to use. But there's definitely other factors to render an opinion.
But you don't tell the person that day that they are being deceptive, right?
No, especially when I have a couple in my office accusing each other of infidelity. The last thing I want to do is tell them that they passed or failed, or he was cheating or she was cheating, and then it turns into a Jerry Springer episode where they're fighting in
Right.
my office. So I go ahead and I explain to, because scoring the actual charts, from start to finish and then generating the report takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do everything I'm done. So I make sure I let them know, listen, you're not getting results in the office. You will get everything once I'm all done scoring, and I will email you the report because I don't need like blood on my floor. I don't need to call the cops. I don't want to be a witness to anything. So if you guys want to go out, you do it in the privacy of your own home.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an interesting part of the podcast if you would have these couples on the air and did a live show. Let's find out who was cheating on
Yeah.
who.
Yeah. Well, then I don't, yeah, I just have to be careful. I don't want to open up Pandora's box and possibly be a witness to violence because there was actually one time that happened. I wasn't running the test. My father was running the exam. And the wife, I believe, was like a social worker. The husband, I think he had a blue collar career. She was accusing him of infidelity, and the exam was over, and he was walking the gentleman out of the polygraph suite, and the wife apparently had a Snapple bottle, like the glass Snapple bottle, in like a bodega, either bag or plastic bag, and she cracked him in the face
Oh,
after the test because she automatically assumed he failed. Like she had such a preset disposition. And so like my dad had to call the cops. They came and arrested her. Long story short, he passed the exam. So she cracked him in the face. She lost her social worker license. She picked up a criminal history and eventually they got divorced. Good for him on that one. But she didn't even have the results yet. So that reason alone in that situation are why I do not give results in person. But there are times where I will have an individual that is deceptive. And I understand, I have the scoring, it's all done. I will bring the person back into the polygraph suite and say, here's the situation. Your physiological tracings, meaning what your body produced for me to go ahead and score, your reactions are indicative of deception to the questions on the exam about the situation of why you're here. We need to have a further conversation. So, what exactly about the test annoyed you? What bothered you? You like help me help you. And then it comes up to me to establish rapport with them to get them comfortable to a place to either confess or provide more information about the situation. And then I can go ahead and figure out who am I going to interview next.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When you're working with law enforcement, like we mentioned in the intro, that you're not able to use these tests actually in, or the results of the test in court. Is that correct?
So that's definitely one of like the biggest taboo misconceptions out there.
Okay.
So we actually like I mean branches of government, we know there's local, there's state, and we know there's federal. I'll start to kind of pecking order and work my way down. So in the federal court system, polygraphs are admissible. You can use them in criminal court. You can use them in immigration court. And immigration court is kind of like a hot button topic now, given what's going on in the world with policies and procedures. Um, then you can go ahead. You can use it in certain states. New Mexico is the only state in the country right now where it is fully admissible, meaning both sides do not have to agree. If the prosecutor has a polygraph, they want to enter it into evidence, knock yourself out. Same thing for defense. If the individual being accused of a crime wants to take a polygraph exam, they want to submit it into evidence, no problem. It doesn't have to be contested. Whereas I think the numbers around the ballpark of 20, anywhere between like 25 to 30 states, it's admissible with stipulation, meaning that the defense notified the prosecutor of we're taking a polygraph exam. The prosecutor then goes, sure, not a problem, knock yourself out, take a polygraph exam. But you have to understand that if they fail, it is still being entered into evidence. It comes with what's referred to as a stipulation. So
Okay.
that's where, yeah, like that's where defense attorneys have to be like, okay, listen, if you actually did this crime, do not make me tell the prosecutor that you took a test because you're going to fail. So that's why it's great to live in New Mexico, where you can actually go ahead and take the exam with no concern.
So with the immigration issue, are they what are they being tested on as far as polygraphs? Is it like where were you born or what are you trying to find out if you don't mind sharing?
No, it's of course. So with regards to the topic of immigration, there's a couple of reasons that you can qualify to take an exam. Number one, it's usually on the appeals process where an individual has applied for citizenship status or a green card, and they need to go ahead and then meet with customs and immigration officer. The immigration officer may go, you know what, I don't believe your story. I'm going to reject your application. They will then hire an attorney to fight the appeal on that matter. And then they will come to me and say, listen, I have a client. They entered the country on this date. Here's any documentation to support it. We need to verify that they entered the country the way that they did. So I will go ahead and run what I like to, it's a point of entry, but it's referred to as quintillion type of exam, where I will test their narrative. So I'll say on January 14th, 2025, did you board a flight at this airport? And then maybe the next question will be on this date, whatever time it is, did that flight go from this country to this country? Then I will say, when you arrived at the airport upon landing, did you present yourself to an immigration and customs officer? And then did that immigration and customs officer allow you entry into the United States? So I'm testing the narrative of what they tell me just to show the fact of, yes, they took the flight, they landed at, let's say, JFK or whatever airport it is. But whoever was conducting their immigration test, I guess whoever's in the booth or whoever's checking your documents, that they're the ones that let you into the country. So it removes fault of the individual that they actually entered the country legally. However, it's on the immigration officer for not picking up on possibly false documents or false identity, or maybe if you had snuck a child or anyone else in.
That's
So you've got,
interesting. I didn't really think about that as a tool being used in immigration.
yeah, so it's used for that. It's also, there's a Violence Against Women Act, which is a reason why women can apply for asylum for immigration purposes, where they're coming, it's a hostile environment, and that pretty much women are the target, or small children, and it's a reason they can apply for asylum. I've also done marriage fraud type of green card cases, just to show the fact of you either consummated your marriage, the night of your marriage, or within like a 48-hour period. Are you sharing expenses? Do you have joint bank accounts? And then we discuss different components of the actual relationship, just to try and prove legitimacy of the relationship.
That is cool. So let's get into this podcast that you're doing. Again, people should go ahead and like and subscribe to Liars and Lovers. That's available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere where you can get a podcast. I know that you've got at least 6 months of guests lined up. It's a guest format. Do you want to give us a little peek of who you've got coming up?
Yeah, so this has been a concept that I've been kicking around for about 5 or 6 years now, because when people find out what I do for work, they're like, holy crap, you've got stories. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I've got some interesting ones. And so I kind of wanted to do the podcast initially just talking about like a day in life I had going on, because people love hearing about other people's problems.
Right.
Sometimes they don't even want to address their own. But what I've realized over the years is that people don't, there are some women that I've worked with that have no clue what a red flag is in a relationship. They don't understand signs of deception that were going on that maybe wouldn't have been sucked into a certain situation. So the podcast kind of now has taken a educational relationship psychology role, meets determining deception, like what are those red flags in relationship? What's a green flag? What are things you should be looking out for? How to feel safe and protected in your own relationship. So it's definitely it's become like a self-help type of situation. But I've already recorded, I think I've got 15 episodes already recorded. So we're just going to be, or not we, it's me. I'm going to be uploading every Tuesday on all the platforms, and it comes also in the audio and video format. I just did an interview yesterday with Paul Holes for an hour and a half, and that was a great conversation. So that's going to be coming out. Tuesday's episode I'm going to be releasing with Nicole and Maria from Mother Knows Death. And what I'm ultimately doing is when I just sent an email, I put 60 of my friends that are also experts in true crime, and I said, hey, finally doing the podcast. Here's my calendar. Choose a date and time, and let's go. So it's definitely taken off doing well pertaining to booking guests. It's just now just looking for everyone's support pertaining to just subscribing and actually listening to, because I need the feedback. There's nothing wrong with putting a podcast out there and then you get no comments and no feedback. So you could end up just be putting crap out there over and over and nothing changes. So I just want to make sure that whatever is out there that you guys are appreciating it and it's good, solid content, and then also taking case suggestions because the polygraph happens in the media, happens maybe sometimes in local stories. But I've had a couple of women that have listened to the podcast and they shot me an email and they're like, I'm in this situation. I need help with this. Can you possibly give me advice? So I decided, you know what? Let's have a conversation on air. Come into the studio here in Vegas. Let's sit down and have a talk. Let's break out your relationship. Let's see where things went wrong and let's talk about what you could have done better.
Yeah, I think that's such a fascinating idea. And what reminds me about modern relationships that I think is such an issue is that so
Mm-hmm.
many of them are formulated online, and it's so easy to lie about who you really are. And so, giving people some advice about working through those issues and identifying those red flags, I think really is a important task for you.
Yeah, I'm definitely also hitting on with regards to the online dating, how to protect yourself with what's out there because you run into these scammers and you run into
All right, she froze up for a second there, but again, you can get that podcast. It's Liars and Lovers. That's on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, anywhere where you can get a podcast. And you can also, Lisa's got some merch out already. The coffee tumbler looks amazing. Make sure that you pick that up. I know that she's got a Linktree account on her Instagram. Lisa, if people do want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do it? Should they DM you on your IG account?
oh, sorry about that. Apparently, A, the computer almost died, but B, because it's so hot here in the valley, we just use like internet for like, and it randomly stuck. And I did an interview the other day and I had like an awkward face on their live and it
Yeah.
just would unfreeze because I was waiting for the internet to kick back in. So I felt like one of those, the scary ghost guy in the Dolly painting with like a melting face. But yeah, so I mean, I have accessibility to social media accounts. We've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, but the link tree pretty much has everything. Where you can get all the streaming platforms, contact me if there's a case or story that you want to discuss. You can submit that to me on there. But I'm pretty much an open book with my phone in my hand almost 24 hours a day. So I'm definitely accessible and I respond quick.
All right. Well, again, make sure everyone checks that out. It's Liars and Lovers, and you can find that on Instagram as well. If you want to support me, you can start off by liking and subscribing to Santana True Crime. You can also pick up my book. I wrote it with my brother, Dr. Brian Santana. It's a murder on campus, the professor, the cop, and North Carolina's most notorious cold case. That is about the 1973 murder of Virginia Olson, which happened on the campus of UNC Asheville. It is still a cold case and under investigation. And if you would like to get in touch with me, you can on Instagram and other social media platforms at Santana True Crime. Lisa, thank you again. Good luck with the podcast. Hopefully, you'll come back on again.
Yeah.
And good night.